Sorry, the story is not of interest to our readership, was the answer from our local Jewish newspaper. The story in question, this year marked the 50th anniversary of women rabbis being ordained. That anniversary of the ordination of the first female rabbi, Sally Priesand, 50 years ago, was worthy of articles in the New York Times and newspapers around the country, Arizona, Pittsburgh, Cleveland, Marin County, but not South Florida. Even Israel, which sometimes holds disdain for us Reform Jews, had coverage of this anniversary in Israeli newspapers, like the Times of Israel and Haaretz. Prayers and poems and journals were written, art was commissioned, but our own local Jewish press, crickets. As a woman who has worked for over 2 decades in a field where people expect rabbis to be men, I was sad but not surprised. For more than half my life, I have had a front row seat to what Brandeis University law professor Anita Hill articulates about women's experience in the world. Women are told throughout their lives that the problem they are experiencing isn't so bad, which then suggests that no one is going to do anything about it. And if we tell people that early enough, it will ensure that they will remain silent and ensure that people will get the idea that whatever they are doing isn't bad enough to warrant any kind of action. And so these are the kind of cultural messages that we need to check. For some of you, this pathway in my brain from lack of coverage of a story about women rabbis in our local press to the reality of being a woman in the world that exists in my head is ridiculous. But I have uncommon knowledge of being a woman in the Jewish world and the world at large. I know that all 3 branches of the Reform movement, my rabbinical school, the Union for Reform Judaism, and the Central Conference of American Rabbis, have all in this past year put out reports on transgressions against primarily women that were carried out over decades and ignored. If we don't hear about women's voices and women's stories on a minor scale as a local Jewish community, over time, bit by bit by bit, this hurts our community on a major scale. Uncommon knowledge. Uncommon knowledge means possessing wisdom and information essential to a realm, a service, a technique, or a certain area. So you go to your doctor for their uncommon knowledge in medicine, or you go to your accountant for their uncommon knowledge in tax law, and so on, because their uncommon knowledge allows them to see pathways and connections and insights and solutions and information that you may not. You may have uncommon knowledge because of study or experience or practice. A few years ago, Malcolm Gladwell wrote of the 10,000-hour rule. He asserted that key to achieving expertise was solid practice and study for at least 10,000 hours. Uncommon knowledge starts at different points for different areas. So if you're going to be a world-class golfer or gymnast or baseball player, that work to achieve uncommon knowledge must start when you are very, very young. On the other hand, we can't even begin to gain expertise in other areas until we are older. A 4-year-old can't articulate that they want to be an architect or an astronomer until they can grasp more abstract concepts. But in Judaism, uncommon knowledge is different. It comes from the moment you are Jewish. It is there from the get-go and also has to be cultivated. But it is there from the get-go. You have it. I promise you, I'll show you. Maybe that anniversary of women's ordination is not such interest. Well, there is another 50th anniversary mark this year. 50 years ago, as a glass ceiling was being broken in one realm of the Jewish world, hearts were shattered in another realm. On September 5th, 1972, 8 members of a Palestinian group called Black September climbed an unguarded fence in the Olympic Village in Munich during the 1972 Summer Olympics. They burst in the building where the Israeli team was staying, immediately killing wrestling coach Moshe Weinberg and weightlifter Yossi Romano. Some Israeli athletes escaped, but 9 were seized. The captors demanded the release of more than 200 Palestinians held by Israel and 2 German extremists in West German prisons. The attackers demanded a plane and safe passage to Cairo. After a day of tense negotiations, the assailants and their hostages were allowed to leave aboard 2 helicopters. Sharpshooters at the airfield opened fire. The attackers threw a grenade into one of the helicopters carrying hostages, which exploded and shot the hostages in the other helicopter. The West Germans had ignored all warnings of potential attacks and failed to provide even minimal security for the Israeli delegation. Most painfully, the Munich Olympics continued as planned. The terrorists were released after 2.5 months in prison, though Israel took revenge against some eventually. And for decades, the International Olympic Committee refused to commemorate the 11 Israeli athletes killed in those 1972 Olympics. While many in Israel care deeply about this anniversary, they had the impression that 50 years later, no one in the wider world cared. In the ceremonies that just took place in Germany to mark this painful anniversary, there were tensions between the German government and the families of the 11 athletes killed because of inadequate attention and inadequate reparations to the families of the murdered athletes. The pain and suffering of these families, Israel, and the Jewish world has not gone away over 50 years. I have met the daughter of one of the slain athletes who was only 5 months old when her father was killed. And in the years following his death, her grandmother and her uncle committed suicide, so bereft by this loss. Now think about this anniversary. I'm guessing if you are sitting here, you have enough uncommon knowledge to know of world history, Germany's role in the Holocaust, the continued rise of anti-Semitism today, that even if you didn't know the particulars of this 50th anniversary, your heart is touched and maybe even pained by all this. That place where the 50th anniversary touches your heart and pains you is the uncommon knowledge you have and inherit as being part of the Jewish community. It is there from the get-go. That is the blessing of uncommon knowledge for the Jewish community. I can say God or Torah or Israel or Hamantaschen or even Seinfeld, and there is a part of you that perks up. There are shared experiences that even the most peripheral Jew can envision. Sitting at Seder, lighting Hanukkah candles, or even watching the recent Ken Burns documentary on the Holocaust. Even those of us with the most minimal Jewish identity can resonate with Jewish things, particularly us American Jews. Uncommon knowledge to maintain a strong Jewish identity connected to Jewish tradition, history, and life was fully possible from the vantage point of a Jew coming to America. But as Russ Roberts, Dean of Shalem College, has observed, what was once destiny is now a decision. That reality came about for the best of reasons. In our American democracy, freedoms our Jewish grandparents could have never imagined are ordinary, a given. And if our tomorrows look like yesterday, overall, it should be good for us American Jews. And anniversaries and events tied to the Jewish world can be obscured by all the other things competing for our time, our money, and our attention. The decision about whether to pay attention to what is going on in the Jewish world, we may think has no impact on our lives, which puts us in the same position as the children of Israel that are addressed in our Torah reading for Yom Kippur. As we just read in Deuteronomy, we hear, surely this instruction which I enjoin upon you this day is not too baffling for you, not beyond reach, not in the heavens, that you should say, who can go to the heavens and get it for us? Nor is it beyond the sea that you should say, who among us can cross the sea and get it for us, that we may observe it? No, Torah continues, it is very close to you, in your mouth, in your heart, to observe it. The actions carried out in living a Jewish life are an expression of inner commitment. If a mitzvah is close to your mouth but not to your heart, it doesn't make sense to do it. Moses here on this day's Torah portion is making a last-ditch effort to inculcate the Torah into the people who will be the ones to truly fulfill its message in partnership with God. Moses knows that he will be gone soon, and he wants to ensure that Torah is planted deeply enough in the hearts of the Jewish people to survive his death. Rabbi Ezra Bick teaches Moses is trying to inspire them to get beyond their heads into their hearts, where he believes the key to their history, their destiny, their uncommon knowledge lies. Like those ancient Israelites, uncommon knowledge beyond the surface is not inaccessible for the modern Jew if we can overcome indifference and make sure that our hearts are filled with what Judaism teaches as we go about living in the world at large, so that we see things fully, wholly through the eyes of Judaism. I've witnessed it firsthand that if you cultivate knowledge of Judaism beyond the peripheral, it can be powerful and dramatic and meaningful in unimaginable ways. Every other year, a small group of adults pursues adult B'nai Mitzvah, starting from learning the Hebrew alphabet, and in that great meaning is found. Annually, we convene attorneys to examine the Nuremberg trials of the Nazis after World War II. And because of this program, kids have gone to law school, and lawyers are exposed to an area of law that they take back to their own fields of law with a greater understanding of the ever-evolving nature of law. And I see it with our youth. Reminding our youth how powerful it can be to make Judaism intentional and not optional is so much more impactful and meaningful as they form their worldviews. Right now, I am teaching our 8th graders in a Jewish ethics in a field called Musar in Judaism. How many of us could use a course in Jewish ethics in middle school? Present company included. And we start class just checking in to see how they are doing that day. Have you asked an 8th grader lately how they are doing? Try it. It's not easy to be an 8th grader, and Temple is a place where they can grow their uncommon knowledge in the Jewish realm to help them navigate the world at large. How lucky we are that we have arrived at a place where we have so much choice in what our lives look like. But if Judaism looks like a decision and not destiny, then we are missing so much. Milestones in Jewish history, or the life cycle events of your Jewish life, are not meant to be just dots connected from one point to another. Sometimes good, sometimes bad, sometimes beautiful, sometimes sad. Uncommon knowledge says that what you know of Torah commands you to let it inform your life, who you are in the world today. The best metaphor I can think of to illustrate uncommon knowledge is the Torah. Think of the Torah. There are black Hebrew letters that take up some space, but there is the white scroll that takes up so much more space. But the whole Torah is holy. Your Jewish moments are like those black Hebrew letters, and the white space is like the other parts of your life. There's a whole bunch more of white, but it's all holding together. Not just living by the Torah, but like a Torah. Not in proximity, but in pursuit. Not in decision, but destiny. And that is just here in these walls. Raise your gaze across the world to the story of Natan Kazin. Like many Jews from Ukraine, Kazin had made Aliyah to Israel and studied to be a rabbi. Fighting between Ukraine and Russia in 2014 led friends to beg him to come back to Ukraine to help. That helping turned to commanding when he realized all he had learned in the Israeli army prepared him for this moment. Kazin became commander of a Jewish squadron. His rise to military leadership happened very fast. After the first barricades on Rashevsky Street, there was talk of storming the parliament. He went over to some people and asked, what's the main objective? Where are we headed? What are we doing? After about a half hour, he realized there was no one in charge on the ground. People didn't know what to do. He said they only knew that they must press forward. So I asked people there, do you know the correlation of forces? Do you know that in order to storm a building with both sides equally armed, you need 3 times as many people on the storming side? They answered no. When I asked what's the tactical plan, they said they didn't have one. Kazin knew all these questions to ask because he had the extensive combat experience from serving in the Israeli Defense Forces. Kazin reflects, I never imagined that I would put my combat knowledge to use in quiet and peaceful Kyiv. People said to me, in Israel, in the Middle East, things are bad. There's a war. Come here. Stay and live here in peaceful Kyiv. As he took greater leadership at first, he did not tell people he was Jewish. He said he felt like Queen Esther of the Purim story, who didn't say anything about her origins, but gradually decided to reveal his religion and was shocked when he was embraced as brother and people greeted him with shalom. 50 years ago, there was a woman who did make it into the newspaper. It was Prime Minister Golda Meir, who was addressing the government in the midst of the Munich Olympic crisis. As the Times reported, after a 30-minute meeting of the cabinet, Mrs. Meir walked quietly into the chamber of the parliament and mounted the wood-paneled podium. Her soft voice had a grave, almost weary tone as she spoke, like someone who was dealing with an old problem that somehow would not go away. Slowly, she read the names of the hostages: Berger, Gutfreund, Halfin, Slavin, and so on. She read the names with as much preciousness as one would give to reading words of Torah. 50 years later, Israeli Prime Minister Yair Lapid, just a few weeks ago, after another spate of terrorism, gave a speech which encapsulates the uncommon knowledge that one needs to have as a Jew. He said, there is another way to live. The choice is yours. The future depends on you. The right way to face our challenges is together. That speech was given to Gazan residents as a direct appeal to work together with Israel and not let Hamas determine their future. But the words could just as easily appeal to us as an American Jewish community. There is another way to live. The choice is yours. Your future depends on you. The right way to face our challenges is together. Take these words to heart. Acknowledgement of the uncommon knowledge that exists in Judaism is not easy by any means. Sometimes it makes the world darker, as the case with the Munich Olympics anniversary. But sometimes it makes the world better, as it does with the first female rabbi. Uncommon knowledge that makes me so annoyed at the local Jewish press is also the thing that makes me brokenhearted for the Munich Olympic athlete families. And uncommon knowledge also makes me so appreciative that with all the places you could be today, with all the freedoms that being an American Jew I know provides you, that you are here, we are here together, just as the Israelites were thousands of years ago. May the way you see the world, the way you understand your place in it, the milestones you mark in all the realms of your existence be enriched by the uncommon knowledge you have as a Jew, through the sting and through the honey, through Natan and Sally and Golda, through each and every one of you, of us, in 5783. Shana Tova and Som Kal, an easy fast.